The sound of my 8-year-old son hitting the grass wasn't normal. Tommy had been running toward the soccer goal when his legs just gave out. No contact, no stumble. He dropped like his body had simply decided to quit on him. Hit like, subscribe for more Betrayal stories, and comment your location. My name is Marcus Chun, and I thought I'd seen everything during my 12 years in the Army. 3 tours in Afghanistan taught me that life could change in a heartbeat, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened next. I was on the sidelines with the other parents, cheering Tommy on during his Saturday morning game. The kid had been playing soccer since he was 5, and he was good, really good, fast, coordinated, fearless. Just like his old man, his coach always said. But when Tommy collapsed, there was something wrong with the way he fell. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. He just stopped, like someone had unplugged him. I jumped the fence and ran onto the field before the ref could even blow his whistle. Tommy was conscious, but his face was pale, almost gray. His eyes found mine, and I saw something there that made my blood run cold. Fear. Pure, innocent fear. "Dad, my legs feel weird," he whispered as I knelt beside him. "They're all tingly and heavy." The ambulance ride to Children's Hospital felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. Tommy held my hand the entire time, asking questions I couldn't answer. Why couldn't he feel his toes? Why did his back hurt so much? Why was I crying? I wasn't crying. At least, I told myself I wasn't. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez met us in the emergency room. She had kind eyes, but a serious expression that immediately put me on edge. After 3 hours of tests, x-rays, and blood work, she asked to speak with me privately. "Mr. Chun, we need to run some additional tests on Tommy," she said, her voice careful and measured. "The blood work shows some concerning irregularities, and combined with his symptoms." "Just tell me what you think it is," I interrupted. In the Army, we didn't dance around bad news. We faced it head-on. Dr. Rodriguez took a deep breath. "We believe Tommy may have acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It's a type of blood cancer that affects children." The words hit me harder than any IED blast I'd survived overseas. Cancer. My 8-year-old son. The kid who'd never been seriously sick a day in his life. "How sure are you?" I managed to ask. "We'll know more after the bone marrow biopsy tomorrow, but his white blood cell count is extremely elevated, and the fatigue, leg pain, and sudden weakness all point in that direction." I nodded, trying to process the information like I would a mission briefing. Gather intel. Assess the situation. Plan the operation. But this wasn't a military operation. This was my son's life. That night, I sat beside Tommy's hospital bed watching him sleep. He looked so small hooked up to all those machines. Rebecca, my ex-wife, had driven down from Portland as soon as I called her. We'd been divorced for 2 years, but when it came to Tommy, we were still a team. "The doctor thinks it's treatable, right?" Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She said with the right treatment, kids with this type of leukemia have a really good survival rate. I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The next morning, Dr. Rodriguez confirmed our worst fears. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, stage 2. But she also gave us hope. "The good news is we caught it relatively early," she explained. "With aggressive chemotherapy, radiation, and possibly a bone marrow transplant, Tommy has an excellent chance of beating this. The treatment protocol we recommend has an 85% success rate in children his age." "What do we need to do?" I asked. "First, we need to get insurance approval for the treatment plan. It's expensive. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars over the next 2 years. But your military insurance should cover most of it." That afternoon, I called TRICARE, the military insurance program that had covered our family for years. I explained the situation to a representative named David, who assured me that cancer treatment was definitely covered and that they'd expedite the approval process. "Your son's going to be fine, Mr. Chun," David said. "We take care of our military families." I believed him. I had to. Tommy started his first round of chemotherapy that week while we waited for the full treatment approval. The initial drugs made him sick, but he handled it like a champ. He even joked with the nurses, calling his 4-pole R2D2 because of all the beeping sounds it made. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like we were going to beat this thing. Then the letter arrived. I was at home, sorting through 2 weeks' worth of mail, when I saw the official TRICARE envelope. I figured it was the approval paperwork Dr. Rodriguez had been waiting for. I opened it expecting good news. Instead, I found a single page that would change everything. Claim denied. I read the denial letter 3 times before the words actually sank in. Experimental treatment not covered under current policy guidelines. My son was dying, and they were worried about policy guidelines. The phone call to TRICARE lasted 2 hours. 2 hours of being transferred from department to department, explaining Tommy's situation over and over again to representatives who sounded like they were reading from scripts. "I'm sorry, Mr. Chun, but the treatment protocol your son's doctor recommended includes experimental drugs that aren't FDA approved for his specific age group," the final representative explained. Her name was Jennifer Walsh, and she spoke like she was discussing the weather instead of my child's life. But Dr. Rodriguez said this is the standard treatment for kids with Tommy's type of leukemia. I argued, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Standard doesn't mean approved by our medical review board," Walsh replied coldly. "We can cover basic chemotherapy, but not the specialized drug cocktail or the potential bone marrow transplant. How much are we talking about?" "The approved treatment would cost approximately $40,000. The experimental protocol your doctor wants, that's closer to $300,000. I felt the room spinning. $300,000. I'd saved maybe $15,000 since getting out of the Army 2 years ago. My construction job paid decent money, but not that kind of money. "There has to be something you can do," I pleaded. "I served 12 years. 3 combat tours. Doesn't that count for anything?" "Mr. Chun, I understand your frustration, but military service doesn't override medical policy. You can appeal the decision, but I should warn you that these appeals rarely get approved." After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at that denial letter until the words blurred together. I thought about all the times I'd risked my life overseas, believing I was fighting for something bigger than myself, believing that my country would take care of my family if something happened to me. I never imagined they'd abandon us when we needed them most. The next morning, I drove to the TRICARE regional office downtown. I needed to look Jennifer Walsh in the eye and make her understand that we weren't just talking about policy, we were talking about my son's life. The office building was one of those sterile corporate places with marble floors and fake plants. Walsh's office was on the 7th floor, behind a desk that probably cost more than most people made in a month. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a designer suit that screamed money. When I walked in, she was eating sushi from an expensive-looking container while typing on her laptop. "Mr. Chun, I wasn't expecting you," she said, not bothering to look up from her screen. "My son is getting sicker every day," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The basic chemo isn't working. He needs the full treatment protocol." Walsh finally looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that made my blood boil. Indifference. Complete, total indifference. "I explained our position yesterday," she said, closing her laptop with a sharp snap. "The treatment isn't approved. End of discussion. You don't understand. Tommy is 8 years old. He plays soccer. He wants to be an astronaut when he grows up. He's not just a claim number on your desk. Mr. Chun, I process over 200 cases a week. Every one of those people has a sob story. If I approved every experimental treatment that came across my desk, the company would go bankrupt." I stared at her for a long moment, watching her take another bite of her $50 sushi lunch. This woman was deciding my son's fate while eating imported fish and wearing jewelry that cost more than most people's cars. "What if it was your kid?" I asked quietly. "But it's not," she replied without missing a beat. "And frankly, Mr. Chun, emotional manipulation isn't going to change our medical board's decision." I left that office knowing 2 things. Jennifer Walsh didn't care if my son lived or died, and the system I'd served faithfully for 12 years had just declared war on my family. That night, I tucked Tommy into his hospital bed and watched him sleep. His face was thinner now, pale from the limited chemotherapy. Dr. Rodriguez had been asking about the insurance approval every day, her concern growing more obvious. "We can't wait much longer," she'd told me that afternoon. "Tommy needs the full protocol within the next 2 weeks, or his chances start dropping significantly." Rebecca had been calling constantly, asking about the insurance situation. I hadn't told her about the denial yet. I couldn't bear to hear the panic in her voice. But as I sat there watching my son fight for his life, something cold and familiar settled in my chest. It was the same feeling I'd had in Afghanistan when our convoy got ambushed, when the enemy thought they had us cornered. Jennifer Walsh had made a mistake. She thought she was dealing with just another desperate parent who would accept defeat and walk away quietly. She was wrong. I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts, scrolling to a name I hadn't called in over a year. Sergeant Major Rick Morrison, my old intelligence officer. Rick now worked as a private investigator in Seattle, specializing in corporate fraud cases. Some battles you fight with weapons. Others, you fight with information. It was time to find out who Jennifer Walsh really was. Rick Morrison answered on the second ring, just like he always did. "Some habits from the Army never die. Marcus Chun, you son of a gun," his gravelly voice came through the phone. "Been wondering when you'd call. Heard about Tommy through the grapevine. How's the little man holding up?" "Not good, Rick. That's why I'm calling." I explained the situation with TRICARE and Jennifer Walsh, leaving out no details. Rick listened without interrupting, a skill that had made him one of the best intelligence officers I'd ever served with. "So you want me to dig into this Walsh woman?" he said when I finished. "I want to know everything. Where she lives, what she drives, how much money she makes, where she shops, what she had for breakfast last Tuesday. Everything. Marcus, you know I have to ask. What are you planning to do with this information?" I was quiet for a moment, watching Tommy sleep through the hospital room window. "I don't know yet. But my son is dying, and she's the one standing between him and the treatment that could save his life." "Give me 48 hours, Rick said. "I'll call you back." Those 2 days felt like the longest of my life. Tommy's condition was getting worse. The basic chemotherapy wasn't stopping the cancer's spread, and Dr. Rodriguez was getting more anxious by the hour. "We really need to start the full protocol," she told me during rounds. "Tommy's white blood cell count is climbing again, and we're seeing some concerning changes in his bone marrow." "How long do we have?" I asked. "Maybe a week, 10 days at most before we start looking at a much more complicated situation." Rebecca drove down from Portland that afternoon. She took one look at Tommy and immediately knew something was wrong. "He looks terrible, Marcus. What aren't you telling me?" I couldn't keep lying to her. I explained about the insurance denial, about Jennifer Walsh, about the experimental treatment Tommy needed. Rebecca listened with growing horror, her face going pale. $300,000? She whispered. "Where are we supposed to get that kind of money?" "I'm working on it," I said, though I had no idea how. "Working on what?" "Marcus, we don't have time to work on anything. Tommy needs help now." That night, Rebecca broke down crying in the hospital cafeteria. "I can't lose him," she sobbed. "He's all we have left that's good in this world." I held her while she cried, making promises I wasn't sure I could keep. "We're not going to lose him. I won't let that happen." Rick called the next morning while I was drinking coffee in the hospital parking lot. "Got your intel on Jennifer Walsh," he said. "And Marcus, this is some seriously messed up stuff." "Tell me." "She's been working for TRICARE for 8 years, started as a claims processor, and worked her way up to senior medical reviewer. Here's the interesting part. Her performance bonuses are directly tied to how many high-dollar claims she denies." "What do you mean?" "I mean she gets paid extra money for every expensive treatment she rejects. Last year alone, she earned over $60,000 in denial bonuses on top of her base salary." My grip tightened on the phone. "She's getting rich by denying sick people medical care?" "Gets better. She lives in a $2 million house in Bellevue. drives a brand new BMW, and just got back from a 3-week vacation in Europe. All on a government employee's salary, supposedly. How is that possible? That's where it gets really interesting. I found some financial records that suggest she's getting kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies. They pay her under-the-table bonuses for steering patients toward cheaper, less effective treatments. I felt that familiar rage building in my chest, the same fury I'd felt in combat when innocent people got hurt by those who were supposed to protect them. There's more, Rick continued. Walsh has denied over 400 high-dollar cancer treatments in the past 2 years. 400 families, Marcus. 400 kids and adults who got told their life-saving treatment was experimental or not medically necessary. Jesus Christ. I pulled some public records on a few of those cases. 17 people died after being denied treatment. 17 people who might still be alive if they'd gotten the care their doctors recommended. I closed my eyes, thinking about Tommy lying in that hospital bed, getting weaker by the day while Jennifer Walsh counted her blood money. Rick, I need her home address. Marcus, I'm not going to hurt her. I just need to see how she lives. I need to understand who I'm dealing with. Rick was quiet for a moment. She lives at 2847 Lakeview Drive in Bellevue. Big house, security system, probably has cameras. Be careful, brother. That afternoon, I drove to Bellevue. Walsh's house was everything Rick had described. Massive, pristine, surrounded by perfectly manicured lawns and expensive cars. I sat in my old Ford pickup across the street, watching this palace built on the suffering of sick children. At 6:30 p.m., a black BMW pulled into the driveway. Jennifer Walsh got out, carrying shopping bags from high-end stores. She was laughing on her phone, completely carefree, while my son was fighting for his life 50 miles away. As I watched her disappear into her mansion, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. This wasn't just about money for her. She enjoyed it. She enjoyed the power of deciding who lived and who died. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Tommy's fever is spiking. Doctor wants to see us. I started the truck and headed back to the hospital, but I couldn't stop thinking about that house. About the woman inside it who was slowly murdering my son with her indifference. Jennifer Walsh thought she was untouchable, protected by corporate policies and government bureaucracy. She was about to learn that some fathers don't give up that easily. Tommy's fever hit 104 degrees that night. Dr. Rodriguez moved him to the ICU as a precaution, and I watched my son disappear behind a wall of machines and monitors that beeped constantly, like some kind of electronic death march. The infection is getting worse, she explained to Rebecca and me in the hallway. His immune system is too compromised to fight it off effectively. We need to start the aggressive treatment immediately, or we're looking at a very different conversation. Rebecca grabbed my arm. What does that mean? Dr. Rodriguez's expression said everything her words couldn't. We were running out of time. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove back to Bellevue. I'd spent enough time in reconnaissance to know that patterns were everything. If I was going to understand Jennifer Walsh, I needed to understand her routine. She left her house at exactly 7:45 a.m., stopped at the same Starbucks for what looked like an expensive coffee drink, and arrived at the TRICARE building by 8:30. Lunch was always at the same upscale restaurant 2 blocks from her office. The kind of place where a salad cost more than most people spend on groceries in a day. But it was what I witnessed during her lunch break that made me realize just how cold this woman really was. I was sitting in my truck across from the restaurant when I saw Walsh at a table by the window, talking on her phone. She was laughing, actually laughing, while gesturing dismissively with her free hand. Through the window, I could read her lips enough to catch fragments. Just another sob story. And these people think tears will change policy. She was talking about families like mine. Parents begging for their children's lives while she treated it like office gossip. My phone rang. Rebecca's number. Marcus, you need to get here now, she said, her voice shaking. Tommy's asking for you, and the doctor wants to talk to us about other options. I drove back to the hospital doing 80 in a 60 zone, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Other options. I knew what that meant. Tommy was awake when I got to the ICU, but he looked like a ghost of the kid who'd collapsed on that soccer field just weeks ago. His skin was paper-thin and pale, his eyes sunken. When he saw me, he tried to smile. "Hey, Dad," he whispered. "The nurse said you were at work." "I'm here now, buddy. How are you feeling?" "Tired. Really tired. And it hurts to breathe sometimes." I took his small hand in mine, careful not to disturb the 4 lines. "You just focus on getting better, okay? Let me worry about everything else." Dr. Rodriguez pulled Rebecca and me into a private room an hour later. The conversation I'd been dreading finally came. "Tommy's condition is deteriorating rapidly," she said. "Without the full treatment protocol, his chances of survival drop to less than 20%. With it, we're still looking at 70 to 80%. We can't afford the treatment," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. "The insurance company denied it." "I understand. That's why I wanted to talk to you about hospice care. We can make sure Tommy is comfortable and pain-free for whatever time he has left." "No." The word came out harder than I intended. "No hospice care. There has to be another way." "Marcus," Dr. Rodriguez said gently, "I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen families bankrupt themselves trying to pay for treatments like this. Even if you could somehow raise the money, it would take weeks to arrange everything, and Tommy doesn't have weeks." That night, I sat in my truck outside Jennifer Walsh's house again. The lights were on in what looked like a living room, and I could see her through the window, relaxing on an expensive couch, probably watching TV after another day of destroying families. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Saw your truck. This is your neighbor 2 houses down. That woman in the BMW? She's heartless. Threw a fit last month when my kid's ball went in her yard. Some people have no soul." I stared at the message for a long time. Even her neighbors knew what she was. Around 10 p.m., Walsh's phone rang. I watched her answer it, and from her body language, it looked like a work call. She was pacing around her living room, occasionally pointing at papers spread across her coffee table. More denial letters, probably. More families getting the same news I'd gotten 2 weeks ago. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I pulled out my phone and called Rick Morrison. "I need more than just information," I told him when he answered. "What are you thinking? Walsh isn't just denying claims randomly. She's targeting the most expensive cases specifically. There's got to be a pattern, maybe communications with her supervisors or the pharmaceutical companies you mentioned. You want me to dig deeper into her communications? I want you to find proof that she's deliberately letting people die for money. And Rick, I want you to find out who else knows about it." "Marcus, that's getting into some serious territory. If she's taking kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies, and if her supervisors know about it, we're talking about federal crimes." "Good. Because my son is dying while this woman gets rich, and I'm done playing by their rules." After I hung up, I sat in the darkness watching Jennifer Walsh's perfect house. Tomorrow, I'd go back to the hospital and hold my son's hand while he fought for his life with inadequate treatment. But tonight, I was planning a war. Jennifer Walsh thought she held all the cards. She thought her corporate policies and government connections made her untouchable. She was about to discover that she'd picked the wrong family to destroy. Some people fight dirty. Others fight smart. I was about to do both. Rick called me at 3 a.m. with news that made my blood run cold. "Marcus, you need to hear this. I've been digging into Walsh's communications, and what I found, it's bigger than we thought." I was in the hospital parking lot, having spent another sleepless night watching Tommy struggle to breathe. His oxygen levels had dropped twice during the night, and the doctors were talking about putting him on a ventilator. "Tell me," I said, my voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Walsh isn't working alone. She's part of a network, at least 6 senior reviewers across different regions, all coordinating their denials. They have a weekly conference call where they literally discuss which cases to target for maximum profit." I felt sick. "You're telling me there's a conspiracy?" I'm telling you, there's an organized effort to deny expensive treatments to increase corporate profits. And Marcus, I found recordings. Recordings? Walsh is paranoid about covering her tracks. She records all her business calls and stores them on a private server, probably for blackmail purposes if things ever go south. But here's the thing. She's not as tech-savvy as she thinks. Rick had managed to access Walsh's private files through a security vulnerability in her home network. What he found was a treasure trove of evidence that would destroy not just Walsh, but the entire corrupt system she was part of. There's a call from last Tuesday, Rick continued. Walsh is talking to her supervisor, a guy named Director Paul Matthews. They're specifically discussing Tommy's case. My hands started shaking. What did they say? Matthews tells Walsh that high-profile military families sometimes generate media attention if their kids die. He suggests approving just enough treatment to keep Tommy alive for a few more months, then claiming the cancer was too advanced for any treatment to work. They want to let him die slowly to avoid bad publicity. That's exactly what they want. Walsh laughs and says she'll schedule another review in 60 days. Knowing full well that Tommy won't survive that long without proper treatment. I had to pull over. The rage building in my chest was so intense I could barely see straight. These people weren't just denying medical care. They were coldly calculating my son's death for public relations purposes. There's more, Rick said. Walsh received a $50,000 bonus last month from Meridian Pharmaceuticals for steering patients away from their competitors' more expensive cancer drugs. The money went to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. How many other families? Based on the recorded calls I've found so far, at least 24 kids in the past year alone, all with treatable conditions, all denied the care that could have saved them. I closed my eyes, thinking about 24 other families going through what Rebecca and I were experiencing. 24 other children who died because Jennifer Walsh needed money for European vacations and luxury cars. Rick, I need you to copy everything. Every recording, every email, every financial document. Already done. But Marcus, what are you planning to do with this information? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a call from Rebecca. Marcus, get here now, she said, panic clear in her voice. Tommy's crashing. I raced back into the hospital, finding Rebecca in tears outside the ICU. Through the window, I could see a team of doctors and nurses working on Tommy, who looked even smaller surrounded by all the emergency equipment. Dr. Rodriguez came out 20 minutes later, her scrubs stained with sweat. We stabilized him. But Marcus, this is what I was afraid of. Tommy's body is shutting down. Without the proper treatment, these episodes are going to keep happening, and each one makes his chances worse. How long? I asked. Days. Maybe a week if we're lucky. Rebecca collapsed into a chair, sobbing. I can't watch him die. I can't do this anymore. That afternoon, while Rebecca sat with Tommy, I made a decision that went against every instinct I developed in 12 years of military service. Instead of going through proper channels, instead of trusting the system, I was going to take Jennifer Walsh down using her own methods. I called Rick back. I want you to send those recordings to every major news outlet in the country. CNN, Fox News, NBC, everyone. Marcus, if you do that, there's no going back. Walsh will know it was you, and she'll come after you with everything she's got. Let her come. My son is dying because of her greed. I'm done being polite. There's something else you should know, Rick said. Walsh has been monitoring your calls to TRICARE. She knows you've been asking questions, and she's flagged your case for special attention. What kind of special attention? The kind where they make sure your appeals never get processed. She's actively sabotaging any chance Tommy has of getting approved treatment. That night, I sat in my truck outside Walsh's house one last time. But this time, I wasn't just watching. I was waiting. At 11:47 p.m., Walsh's house phone rang. I watched her answer it through the window, and based on her animated gestures, it was clearly a business call. Another late-night discussion about whose life was worth saving and whose wasn't. As I watched this monster disguised as a human being laugh about destroying families, my phone rang. Dr. Rodriguez's number. Marcus, Tommy's asking for you. His fever is spiking again, and he's having trouble staying awake. You should come now. I started the truck, but as I pulled away from Walsh's house, I made a promise to my son and to every other child whose life she'd stolen. Jennifer Walsh thought she was untouchable because she had corporate protection and government backing. She was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is a father with nothing left to lose. Tommy was unconscious when I got to the hospital. The machines around his bed were beeping frantically, and his breathing was so shallow I had to watch his chest closely to see it moving at all. His kidneys are starting to fail, Dr. Rodriguez explained quietly. The infection is overwhelming his system. We're doing everything we can with the approved medications, but Marcus, it's not enough. Rebecca hadn't left Tommy's side in 12 hours. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. He keeps asking for you when he wakes up. He wants to know when he can go home. I couldn't answer that. I couldn't tell her that I'd been sitting outside Jennifer Walsh's house planning revenge while our son was dying 50 miles away. My phone buzzed with a text from Rick. News outlets are interested, but they want more sources. Military angle is getting attention. Call me. I stepped out into the hallway to call him back. The story is gaining traction, Rick said. But here's the thing. I reached out to some of my old Army contacts, and you're not going to believe what I found. What? Remember Staff Sergeant Maria Santos from your unit in Afghanistan? Her daughter died last year from the same type of leukemia Tommy has. Guess who denied her treatment? The hallway started spinning. Maria Santos had saved my life during a firefight in Kandahar. She was one of the bravest soldiers I'd ever served with, and she'd lost her 8-year-old daughter to the same disease that was killing Tommy. Jennifer Walsh denied Maria's daughter too? Not just denied. She personally called Maria to inform her that the treatment was experimental and not cost-effective for the military healthcare system. Maria's daughter died 3 weeks later. I had to lean against the wall. Jesus Christ. Does Maria know about Tommy? That's why I'm calling. Maria reached out to me after hearing about your situation through the Veteran Network. She wants to help. And Marcus, she's not the only one. Over the next hour, Rick connected me with 5 other military families whose children had been denied treatment by Jennifer Walsh. 5 families who had watched their kids die while Walsh collected bonuses for saving the insurance company money. The pattern was always the same. Walsh specifically targeted military families because they were less likely to have private resources to fight the denials. She knew that most service members trusted the system and wouldn't push back aggressively when told their child's treatment wasn't approved. We've been organizing, Maria Santos told me when Rick patched her through. There are at least 15 families that we know of so far, all with similar stories. Walsh has been systematically targeting military children for high-dollar treatment denials. Why haven't you gone public? We tried. But Walsh's supervisor, Director Paul Matthews, has connections in the Pentagon. Every time we filed complaints, they disappeared into bureaucratic black holes. One father got court-martialed for insubordination after he confronted Walsh at her office. That's when I realized the scope of what we were dealing with. This wasn't just insurance fraud. It was a coordinated effort to exploit military families' trust in the system they'd served. Marcus, Maria continued. Rick told us about the recordings he found. If we can get those to the right people, we can bring down the whole network. What do you need from me? Your story. Tommy's story. You're active in the community, you have credibility, and your son is still alive. That matters for media coverage. I looked back through the window at Tommy, hooked up to machines that were barely keeping him breathing. What's the plan? We have a contact at 60 Minutes, Maria said. Investigative journalist named Catherine Webb. She's been looking into military healthcare corruption for months. With Rick's evidence and our testimonies, she thinks she can expose the whole thing. How long will that take? Maria was quiet for a moment. Probably a few weeks to verify everything and put the story together. Tommy didn't have a few weeks. Maybe not even a few days. There has to be another way, I said. Actually, there might be, Rick interjected. I've been tracking Walsh's communications, and she's getting nervous. Word is starting to spread about the investigation, and she's been making some very interesting phone calls. What kind of calls? Calls to Director Matthews about transferring money out of her offshore accounts. Calls to pharmaceutical company executives about ending their arrangement. And Marcus calls to a private security firm about handling a problem with a disgruntled military family. My blood went cold. She's threatening us? She's considering it. But here's the thing. All those calls are being recorded on her own system. She's documenting her own criminal conspiracy. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, motioning frantically. Marcus, get in here. He's waking up. I rushed back into the ICU. Tommy's eyes were open, but they looked different, distant, and unfocused. Dad? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Are you there? I'm here, buddy. I'm right here. I had a dream about you, he said, struggling to speak. You were fighting the bad guys again, like in the army. But this time, you were fighting for me. I took his small hand, feeling how cold and fragile it was. I am fighting for you, Tommy. I'm fighting as hard as I can. I know, he said, managing a weak smile. You always win when you fight the bad guys. As Tommy drifted back to sleep, I made a decision that went against every military principle I'd ever learned. Sometimes, you couldn't wait for backup. Sometimes, you had to take the fight directly to the enemy. I walked out of the hospital and called Rick one more time. How quickly can you get me everything Walsh has ever said about military families? Give me 12 hours. Why? Because tomorrow morning, I'm going to walk into Jennifer Walsh's office with enough evidence to bury her. And I'm not leaving until my son gets the treatment he needs. Marcus, that's dangerous. If she's hired private security, let her bring security. I've been in real firefights with real bullets. I'm not afraid of some corporate thug. That night, I sat beside Tommy's bed holding his hand while Rebecca slept in the chair next to us. My phone was full of messages from the other military families, all offering support, all sharing their own horror stories about Jennifer Walsh. But as I watched my son fighting for each breath, I realized something that changed everything. This wasn't just about Tommy anymore. This was about every military child whose life Jennifer Walsh had stolen for profit. Tomorrow, the war would begin. Rick delivered the evidence at 6 a.m. sharp. Printed transcripts of Walsh's recorded calls, financial documents showing her offshore accounts, and photographs of her meeting with pharmaceutical executives. Everything we needed to destroy her career and put her in federal prison. You sure about this approach? Rick asked as I loaded the files into my truck. Once you walk into that office, there's no turning back. My son might not live through another night, I replied. I'm done waiting for the system to work. The TRICARE building was just opening when I arrived. I walked past security, took the elevator to the 7th floor, and knocked on Jennifer Walsh's office door. Come in, she called. Walsh looked up from her computer screen, and I watched her face change when she recognized me. The smug confidence disappeared, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Mr. Chun, I wasn't expecting you. I set the thick folder of evidence on her desk. We need to talk. If this is about your son's case, I already explained our position. Your position is taking bribes from pharmaceutical companies while children die. I interrupted, opening the folder. Your position is coordinating with other reviewers to systematically deny military families the medical care their kids need. Walsh's face went pale as she saw the printed transcripts. I don't know what you think you found, but I found recordings of you laughing about letting my son die slowly to avoid bad publicity, I said, my voice deadly calm. I found bank records showing $50,000 in payments from Meridian Pharmaceuticals. I found emails where you discussed targeting military families specifically because we're less likely to fight back. She reached for her phone, but I placed my hand over it. Don't, I said quietly. You're going to sit there and listen. For the next 10 minutes, I laid out everything we knew. The network of corrupt reviewers, the offshore accounts, the recorded conversations about letting children die for profit. With each piece of evidence, Walsh seemed to shrink further into her chair. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to approve Tommy's treatment today. Full protocol, no restrictions, no delays. I can't just, yes, you can. You're going to call Dr. Rodriguez right now and tell her that TRICARE is covering everything. Then you're going to approve every single case that you and your network have denied in the past 2 years. Walsh was shaking now. You don't understand. If I approve all those cases, the company will investigate. They'll find out about the pharmaceutical arrangements. Good. Because your next call is going to be to the FBI, confessing to everything. Insurance fraud, bribery, conspiracy to commit murder. Murder. 17 children have died because you denied their treatment for money. That's 17 counts of murder for profit. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. I've got Maria Santos on speed dial. Remember her? Staff Sergeant Santos, whose daughter died last year after you personally denied her leukemia treatment. She's part of a group of 15 military families who are ready to testify against you. What do you want? I want you to choose. You can save what's left of your career by approving my son's treatment and cooperating with the investigation, or you can fight this and spend the next 20 years in federal prison while your story becomes a national scandal. Walsh stared at the evidence folder for a long moment. Finally, she picked up her phone and dialed Dr. Rodriguez's number. Dr. Rodriguez? This is Jennifer Walsh from TRICARE. I'm calling about Tommy Chen's case. After further review, we're approving the full treatment protocol, effective immediately. I listened to Dr. Rodriguez's surprised response. Then Walsh hung up and looked at me with defeated eyes. It's done. Your son will get his treatment. That's just the beginning, I said, standing up. Tomorrow morning, you're going to walk into the FBI field office and tell them everything. If you don't, these recordings and documents go to every news outlet in the country. As I reached the door, Walsh called out, "Why didn't you just go to the media first? Why give me the chance to cooperate?" I turned back to her. Because despite everything you've done, I'm still a soldier. Soldiers believe in giving the enemy a chance to surrender before we destroy them completely. And if I don't surrender, then you'll discover that some wars are worth fighting, no matter the cost. Dr. Rodriguez called me before I even made it back to the hospital. "Marcus, I don't know what you did, but Tommy's treatment has been approved. Full protocol, everything we discussed. We can start the aggressive chemotherapy immediately." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. "How soon?" "I'm ordering the medications now. We'll begin this afternoon." When I walked into Tommy's room, Rebecca was sitting beside his bed reading him a story. He looked so small and fragile, but when he saw me, his face lit up with that smile I'd been afraid I might never see again. "Dad, Mom says I get to start the good medicine today." "That's right, buddy. The doctors are going to make you all better." Rebecca pulled me aside. "How did you get them to approve it?" "I convinced them it was the right thing to do." She studied my face, and I could tell she knew there was more to the story. But she didn't push. Some battles you fight alone, and some victories you keep to yourself. That afternoon, as Tommy received his first dose of the proper chemotherapy, I got a call from Rick. "You're not going to believe this," he said. Walsh didn't wait until tomorrow. She walked into the FBI field office 2 hours ago with a lawyer and started talking. What did she tell them? Everything. The pharmaceutical kickbacks, the coordinated denials, the offshore accounts. She's cooperating fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. I felt a mix of satisfaction and relief. What about the other reviewers? That's where it gets interesting. As soon as word got out that Walsh was talking to the feds, 3 other senior reviewers came forward with their own confessions. Apparently, they've all been keeping evidence on each other as insurance policies. How big is this thing? Bigger than we thought. The FBI estimates that over 200 families have been affected in the past 3 years. The insurance company is looking at criminal charges, and several pharmaceutical executives are being arrested as we speak. That evening, Catherine Webb from 60 Minutes called me directly. "Mr. Chun, I've been following your story through Rick Morrison and the Military Families Network. We'd like to interview you for a segment that will air this Sunday. What kind of segment? We're calling it Denied to Die. It's an investigation into the systematic denial of medical treatment to military families. Your son's case is the catalyst, but this story affects hundreds of families. I looked through the window at Tommy, who was already responding to the new medication. His color was better, and he'd eaten his first full meal in days. I'll do the interview, but I want something in return. What's that? I want you to tell the stories of the children who didn't survive. Maria Santos's daughter and all the others. Their families deserve to have their stories heard. Absolutely. We're already reaching out to those families. The next morning brought news that made everything worthwhile. Tommy's white blood cell count had dropped significantly overnight, and Dr. Rodriguez was cautiously optimistic. It's too early to declare victory, she cautioned, but Tommy's responding better to this protocol than I dared hope. His body is fighting back. Rebecca cried happy tears for the first time since this nightmare began. Is he going to be okay? I think so, but it's going to be a long road. Months of treatment, careful monitoring, and a lot of patience. We can handle that, I said. We can handle anything as long as he's fighting. That afternoon, my phone started ringing nonstop. News outlets across the country wanted interviews. Congressional representatives were calling for investigations. Military families were sharing their own stories of denied claims and delayed treatments. But the call that meant the most came from an unexpected source. Mr. Chen, this is Director Paul Matthews from TRICARE. I wanted to personally apologize for what happened to your family and assure you that we're implementing immediate reforms to prevent this from happening again. It's a little late for apologies, I replied coldly. I understand your anger, but I want you to know that Jennifer Walsh and her network operated without my knowledge. As soon as I learned about their activities, I initiated a full internal investigation. I almost laughed. Matthews, I have recordings of you discussing my son's case with Walsh. Don't insult my intelligence by claiming ignorance. There was a long pause. Mr. Chen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding is thinking you could get away with this. The FBI has copies of every conversation, every email, every financial transaction. You're going to prison along with Walsh. I hung up before he could respond. That evening, as Tommy slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, I sat in the hospital parking lot and called Maria Santos. We did it, she said when she answered. The whole network is collapsing. It's not over yet. There's still the trials, the investigations, making sure this never happens again. But Marcus, we saved other families from going through what we went through. That matters. She was right. Jennifer Walsh's reign of terror was over, and no other military family would have to watch their child die while she counted her blood money. But as I looked up at Tommy's window, I realized the most important battle was still being fought in that hospital room. The 60-minute segment aired on a Sunday night 3 weeks later. By Monday morning, the story had exploded across every major news network in the country. Military families betrayed. Inside the insurance scandal that left children to die became the headline that defined the week. Catherine Webb's investigation exposed not just Jennifer Walsh's corruption, but an entire system designed to exploit the families of those who served their country. I watched the segment from Tommy's hospital room. He was responding incredibly well to treatment. His hair was starting to grow back, and he'd gained enough strength to complain about the hospital food, which Dr. Rodriguez said was actually a very good sign. Dad, is that lady the one who tried to hurt me? Tommy asked when Walsh's face appeared on screen during her perp walk. She's the one who tried to stop your medicine, I said. But she can't hurt anyone anymore. The congressional hearings began 2 days later. I testified on Tuesday, sitting at a long wooden table facing a panel of senators and representatives who seemed genuinely shocked by what they were hearing. Mr. Chen, Senator Patricia Williams from the Armed Services Committee asked, in your opinion, how widespread was this conspiracy? Senator, based on the evidence we've gathered, at least 200 military families were targeted over a 3-year period. But I believe that's just the tip of the iceberg. This system has been in place much longer than anyone wants to admit. What would you say to other military families who might be facing similar denials? Fight. Don't accept no as an answer when your child's life is at stake. Document everything. Record every conversation if your state allows it, and reach out to other families. The enemy here isn't just bureaucracy. It's organized greed disguised as policy. The hearing room was packed with military families, many of whom had lost children to Walsh's denials. When I mentioned the 17 kids who died because of delayed or denied treatment, several parents broke down crying. After my testimony, I was approached by Congressman Robert Hayes, a Marine veteran who served on the Veterans Affairs Committee. Mr. Chun, I want to introduce legislation requiring military medical reviewers to be licensed physicians, not just administrative personnel with financial incentives to deny care. Would you be willing to work with us on that? Absolutely. But I want more than just reform. I want accountability. Every family that lost a child because of these denials deserves justice. That evening, Rebecca and I had dinner in the hospital cafeteria while Tommy slept upstairs. It was the first normal meal we'd shared in months. Do you think it's really over? She asked. The criminal part is over. Walsh pled guilty to 15 federal charges yesterday. Matthews and 3 other supervisors were indicted. The pharmaceutical executives are facing RICO charges. What about Tommy? I smiled, feeling genuine hope for the first time since this began. Dr. Rodriguez says if he keeps responding this well, he'll be in full remission within 6 months. Normal life, back to school, maybe even back to soccer. Rebecca reached across the table and took my hand. I'm proud of you, Marcus. What you did, it took courage. It took desperation. I was watching our son die, while the people who were supposed to help us got rich from our suffering. It was more than that. You could have just fought for Tommy, but you fought for everyone. All those other families. She was right, though I hadn't seen it that way at the time. What started as a father's desperate attempt to save his son had become something bigger, a battle against a system that viewed military families as acceptable casualties in the pursuit of profit. The trials began in federal court 6 months later. I testified again, this time as the lead witness in the prosecution of Jennifer Walsh and her network. Walsh's defense attorney tried to paint her as a scapegoat, claiming she was following orders from her superiors. But the recorded conversations Rick had uncovered told a different story. In her own words, Walsh discussed targeting military families because they were less likely to lawyer up and bragged about her bonus payments for high-dollar denials. Mrs. Walsh, the prosecutor asked during cross-examination, when Mr. Chin's son was dying in the hospital, and you knew that the treatment his doctor recommended could save his life, what was going through your mind? Walsh's answer became the most damning moment of the entire trial. I was thinking about the company's quarterly profit margins. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. When the judge sentenced Walsh to 18 years in federal prison, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Tommy's diagnosis: true peace. But the moment that meant the most came later that day, outside the courthouse. Maria Santos approached me with tears in her eyes. My daughter would be 9 years old today, she said. She would have been cancer-free for 6 months if Walsh had approved her treatment. I'm sorry we couldn't save her, I replied. But you made sure no other child will die the way she did. That matters, Marcus. That matters more than you know. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From a terrified father watching his son collapse on a soccer field to a man who'd taken on a corrupt system and won. Tommy was waiting for me when I got home, fully recovered and back to his old self. He ran up to me with a drawing he'd made at school. Look, Dad, it's you fighting the dragon. The drawing showed a stick figure with a sword facing off against a giant green dragon. At the bottom, in Tommy's careful handwriting, it said, "My dad the hero." I looked at that drawing for a long time, thinking about heroes and dragons and the battles we fight for the people we love. You know what, buddy? Sometimes the dragon wins. But not this time. 2 years later, I stood in the lobby of the newly constructed Marcus Chun Military Family Medical Advocacy Center, watching families navigate the resources we'd built from the ashes of Jennifer Walsh's corruption. The center was funded entirely by the class action settlement, $847 million that TRICARE was forced to pay to the families affected by the denial network. It wasn't just money, though. It was acknowledgement. It was justice. It was a promise that this would never happen again. Tommy, now 10 years old and cancer-free for 18 months, ran up to me holding a soccer ball. "Dad, can we go practice before the meeting starts?" I smiled, remembering the day he collapsed on that field 2 years ago. Now he was faster and stronger than ever, with a full head of thick brown hair and a smile that could light up a room. 10 minutes, I said. Then we need to get ready for the ceremony. Today was the center's official opening, and families were coming from across the country to see what we'd built together. Maria Santos was there with her husband, wearing a pin with her daughter's picture. The Hendersons had driven from Texas. Their son Michael had survived his leukemia battle after we exposed Walsh's network and got his treatment approved. The Kowalskis came from Michigan, though their daughter hadn't been as fortunate. Each family represented a victory and a tragedy, hope and heartbreak intertwined in the complex mathematics of human suffering. "Marcus," Rebecca said, joining us in the lobby. She wore a blue dress and the smile she'd lost during Tommy's illness, but gradually found again as he recovered. "The congressman is here." Congressman Robert Hayes, true to his word, had authored the Military Family Medical Protection Act, which passed unanimously 6 months ago. The law required all military medical reviewers to be licensed physicians and established an independent oversight board to investigate denial patterns. "Ready for your speech?" Rebecca asked. I looked around the center. Computers where families could research treatment options, legal aid offices to help fight denials, and a children's area where kids could play while their parents navigated the complexities of military health care. "I think so." The ceremony began at 2 p.m. I stood at a podium facing a crowd of military families, congressional representatives, and journalists who had covered our story from the beginning. 2 years ago, my son collapsed on a soccer field, and I learned that the system I'd served faithfully for 12 years was willing to let him die for profit. I began. Today, Tommy is healthy and happy, but 17 other children didn't survive Jennifer Walsh's greed. I paused, looking at the families in the front row who had lost children to the denial network. This center exists because of those 17 kids. Every resource we provide, every family we help, every denial we overturn, it's all in memory of the children who should still be with us today. Catherine Webb from 60 Minutes was in the audience, working on a follow-up piece about the reforms that had come from our investigation. She'd told me earlier that 3 other insurance companies had been caught operating similar denial networks, all exposed because of the precedent our case had set. The Marcus Chin Act, as some journalists had nicknamed the new law, was already preventing denials across all branches of military health care. More importantly, it was saving lives. After the ceremony, as families toured the center and children played in the activity area, I found myself standing alone in the memorial room we'd created for the kids who didn't survive. 17 photographs lined the walls. 17 smiling children who should have grown up to be teachers and doctors and soldiers and parents. Instead, they became the catalyst for change, their deaths the proof that exposed a system of organized cruelty. Tommy found me there, still holding his soccer ball. "Dad, why do you come in here?" "To remember," I said. "To make sure we never forget why we fight." "Are the bad people gone now?" I thought about Jennifer Walsh, serving her 18-year sentence in federal prison. About Director Matthews, who got 12 years. About the pharmaceutical executives who were still awaiting trial. "The bad people can't hurt anyone anymore," I said. "But there are always new bad people, so we have to keep watching. Will you teach me how to watch for them?" I looked down at my son, healthy and strong and full of questions about justice and responsibility. He was 10 years old, But he'd already learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. Yeah, buddy, I'll teach you everything I know. That evening, as the sun set over the advocacy center, I received a call from a father in Colorado whose daughter had just been diagnosed with the same type of leukemia Tommy had survived. Mr. Chun, the insurance company is trying to deny my daughter's treatment. They say it's experimental, but the doctor says it's standard care. I don't know what to do. What's your daughter's name? Emma. She's 7 years old. Well, Emma's father, I said, watching Tommy play soccer in the yard outside our house. Let me tell you what we're going to do. First, you're going to document every conversation with the insurance company. Then you're going to call our legal team. And then we're going to make sure Emma gets exactly the treatment she needs. You'll really help us fight? Fighting is what we do here. Nobody's child dies on our watch. After I hung up, I sat on the porch watching Tommy practice the soccer moves that had once seemed impossible when he was lying in that hospital bed fighting for his life. Rebecca joined me, settling into the chair next to mine. Another family? Another family, I confirmed. But this time, they won't have to fight alone. The stars were coming out, and Tommy was still playing, his laughter echoing across the yard. In a few hours, he'd come inside for dinner, do his homework, maybe watch a movie with us before bed. Normal family things. The kind of ordinary moments I'd thought we might never have again. Jennifer Walsh had tried to steal those moments from us. She'd tried to turn our son into another statistic, another profitable denial in her quarterly bonus calculation. She failed. And every family we help, every denial we overturn, every child who gets the treatment they need, that's our quiet revenge. Not anger or hatred, but healing. Not destruction, but building something better from the ruins of what was broken. Some wars you fight with weapons. Others, you fight with truth, with persistence, with the unbreakable determination of parents who refuse to let their children become acceptable casualties in someone else's profit margin. Tommy scored a goal against our makeshift net and ran toward the porch, arms raised in victory. Did you see that, Dad? Perfect shot. I saw it, champ. That was beautiful. As he ran back to keep practicing, I realized that this moment, watching my healthy son play in our yard while families across the country slept peacefully knowing they had advocates fighting for them. This was what justice looked like. Not revenge, not punishment, just the simple, powerful act of making sure no other family would have to fight this battle alone.